Hi Pop Tarts, I'm going to give you some tips today on how to strengthen your abilities with visualization. If you're anything like me, visualization has been a thing that you've had difficulty with on and off, partly because of monkey mind and partly because of maybe a very overactive imagination. I have a really overactive imagination. It's very difficult for me to settle on one visualization that I've decided upon in order to achieve a specific result or get me into a certain mindset. That can be quite difficult, so I've had to develop a few techniques and different ways of doing it to kind of strengthen my ability. I will say that I do think that meditation and visualization, in terms of the capability of doing both, are actually tied in together, or at least I do feel that the practice of meditation on a regular basis will aid your ability to do effective visualizations. The simple reason being is that meditation is obviously a discipline. It's something that you train your mind to do and get used to, and it's something that you become incredibly practiced at and better with over time. And I do feel that being able to get yourself into the meditative state, being able to clear your mind, being able to focus on the breath or center on the body, actually strengthens your ability to discipline and focus your mind in any one direction. So it's not just good for meditation, it's not just good for clearing and focusing, it's actually really good as a way to show yourself how in control of your mind you really are and which outside influences you can push away to the sides so that you can enjoy a good kind of enduring, enriching visualization. People do visualizations for all kinds of different reasons. I know most of us do a visualization during ritual, and a lot of people do visualizations to get in touch with deity. A lot of people do it to stay calm and centered, to battle with anxiety, and so on. I mean, the reasons for doing visualizations are endless, but I think most witches do practice some form of visualization, and for some of us, it's quite sort of a key stock part of our ritual experience. So I do feel that meditation has helped me a great deal. It's just helped me to really recognize consciously how much discipline I do have over my mind, and it's helped me be able to center on one image or one scene. Particularly when I'm path working with tarot, that used to be quite difficult to do. And once I got into regular meditation again, even when I don't know how many of you saw my video on thoughts on meditation, but a lot of that was me griping and complaining about the great big gap in my meditation practice and the fact that I did spend quite a long time unable to practice meditation. And I used to start meditating in the bath because it was the only time I could really find that I'd get even remotely into the meditative state. So I used to do that. And I think even at that point, my ability to visualize effectively became much stronger. So I do feel that they're quite tied in together. And I think if you don't practice meditation on any level and you are struggling to maintain strong visualizations and keep them going and actually work your way through them, then meditation would be a fantastic place for you to start with, trying to strengthen your mind's ability to stick with one thing and to really get that thing in your head. I think that automatic writing can be quite useful for visualization because I think it does send you into somewhat of a trance state. Everyone has their different ways of getting into a trance state, and people, of course, as well use trance states for different purposes. But I do feel like when we're automatic writing, we're actually sort of releasing control over our mind, and we're not entirely sure where it's going to go. But sometimes the visualization that we have with the words we're writing kind of takes over, and it's still automatic writing, but it becomes kind of centered and focused on one scene or one idea, one place. And sometimes for me, that's been a really powerful visualization that's come out of that kind of came quite organically. So if you have a visualization in mind or a scene in mind or something that you really want to work with, but you're finding it difficult to get into that mode, I would suggest just beginning automatic writing on and around the scene itself, describing maybe what it looks like, or how you feel as part of it, what you can see in front of you, but really almost letting the pen go and feeling that mind body connection, the way the pen in your hand kind of ties in with your mind. And some people do find they get really strong, effective visualizations out of that. I certainly find that I do. And if you're practiced at automatic writing anyway for purposes of self development or emotional or spiritual exploration, then you'll know that it can actually be quite potent. When you're attempting to manifest a specific visualization through automatic writing, it's not going to be quite as organic as it would be if you were just placing pen to paper and wanting to know what would come out. Obviously, you do have a specific idea in mind that you want to write about the scene of the visualization itself, but very quickly you find that mind body connection becomes very strong, and it's almost like the writing just feeds into your ability to have the visualization. So I do find that that helps quite a lot, and picture path working as well, not just with tarot cards, but I have several key kind of photographs that I found in magazines of sprawling epic scenes that kind of go out into the distance. I have a really beautiful one in my book of chaos. I don't have it to hand right now, but it's like a really rustic town, and it's autumn, and the town kind of stretches into the distance, and you can see all these different houses and things going on, and I think it's quite a snowy scene. That for me is really helpful, that kind of thing. If I can't close my eyes and see that something really strong is coming to mind, or see that I can really stick with the visualization that I've centered on, if there's too much monkey mind going on, or if I find that my imagination is just having free reign and I can't get a hold of it, then I tend to like to try and find an image, a photograph of some kind that kind of expresses the way I want my visualization to go, or kind of taps into the kind of feelings I'm trying to generate, or kind of energies I'm trying to generate. And instead of closing my eyes, I actually focus on that picture and I place myself into that picture, because that's very useful, because on the one hand I've got the trigger there, I've got the picture in front of me, so I can see a scene and I can imagine myself walking into that scene. But I still need to path work, I still need to go into the houses that I see in the picture, or duck round the corners that I see in the picture. I need to go to the places that are out of sight. So I'm still using my imagination to create a visualization which is truly unique and which really goes somewhere, and which can kind of completely absorb me and take me off down different avenues. But at the same time, I've still got that picture present in front of me to kind of center me on the atmosphere and the environment that I'm in during visualization. So if I do wander off in my head, I can always just stop and kind of zoom out and look at the image that I'm focusing on, and then decide, right, okay, I'm going back into that world, I'm going back into that house over there, or that place over there in the photograph. So I'm kind of permitting my imagination to take over and strengthen the visualization, but I still have what I like to call that visual anchor. And a lot of the time when I do visualization, I'm desperately in need of that anchor. Not always, but I do find that visualization is something that I tend to struggle with. A lot of people do like to use the visualizations that have been laid out in books, like in witchcraft source material and stuff. You'll find a lot of suggested visualizations. I find this very difficult to do. I've never really been sure why. Sometimes I feel that it's because the visualizations are not written descriptively enough for me, or they don't really grab me emotionally to the extent where I really find that I want to get on board with that visualization, and that the idea of doing it really resonates with me. I find sometimes that visualizations are kind of written quite ham-fistedly, and they could have been written much more delicately and much more potently. So sometimes it's the writing that doesn't gel with me. And sometimes I'm just going through a book about witchcraft or paganism, and I'll see a visualization which is suggested for a sabbat or an esbat, and even though it might be written quite poignantly, it's not exactly what I imagine I would need to visualize to conjure up the specific energies necessary for that sabbat or esbat. So that might be another reason why the visualizations in books don't really gel with me. Sometimes I'll read one that I really like the idea of, and I kind of tweak it according to what I need. So that can sometimes happen, but a lot of the time I feel that I need to really create my own world, and I really need to use resources that kind of come out at me quite organically. For example, like I said with the picture path working, I'll be looking through for something that is kind of that's got quite a deep like foreground, middle ground and background, so I feel like I can really walk into it. I won't normally use kind of a flat scene, or just something against a wall, or just kind of something that's seems like it doesn't go that far back, because in path working I really want to feel like I can launch, like I can really project into the picture. So it will be a picture with sort of various different layers, like maybe a road that's stretching into the distance with things around it. So they're the kind of pictures that I like to use for path working, but you can use whatever kind of images you want. In the past I have been a fan of using the artwork of certain surrealist painters to form strong visualization. So I'll just focus on the painting and I will project, I will launch into that painting. So it's kind of like the path working lends itself to having a very unique visualization, but again I can always pan out, as I said, and have that anchor that I need if my mind does start to wander. So that's another good idea if you do find that keeping strong visualizations is quite tough. I do like to revisit my dreams. I like to revisit my memories, revisit my dreams. I sometimes find that if I have a dream that was very strong and I want to explore its symbology, or I want to explore how it made me feel at the time, I may choose to actually go back to it and form a strong visualization which is centered around what was happening in the dream, where the dream took place, etc. This works on two different levels. Sometimes it's a magical working, and sometimes it's just useful as a psychological construct. I'm not sure if that made sense. Let me just try and explain. Sometimes I will understand that a dream, which for me is part of the astral realm, I don't believe the imagination is any less real than anything else that goes on. I believe everything is consciousness. So the realm of the imagination is very important to me and very central to my spiritual world, my metaphysical universe, if you like. So sometimes I will decide to open sacred space and actually go into the dream and explore it on what I would consider to be a more real or solid basis. Sometimes I just choose to reimagine the setting of the dream to do visualization to achieve a certain feeling or a certain energy, a certain psychological goal. So it's not necessarily so much about visiting the astral realm in waking life. It's more about thinking about a place that I've never been to, that I saw in a dream, and deciding that I'm going to have that as the setting for a visualization. And I sometimes do that with memory too, but that can sometimes be a little bit intricate and tangled up. So I would suggest, first of all, if you've never tried any of these techniques, to go with remembering a scene that you saw in a dream, first of all, and seeing how that goes for you. But picture path working is a very kind of literal way of giving yourself a scene, setting a scene, if you find that creating a scene in your mind is too difficult, or it's very difficult to kind of keep hold of. If you've got that memory of the scene you saw in the dream, or if you've got that visual anchor of the picture in front of you, it can make things much easier to do. Another technique that I'll suggest for you is pre-recording yourself, guiding yourself through the visualization. This isn't something I've personally done, but I've read a few times that it's very useful, and I know a couple of people who do it regularly and absolutely swear by it. If you find that the visualizations that you can find online or in books don't really do it for you, but you also find that when you're trying to formulate your own visualizations, your mind tends to wander, you get that monkey mind issue, or you can't really kind of stay there in the scene, then I would recommend writing down the visualization that you want to actually go through and reading it into a recording device. And then, going into that contemplative state and playing the recording for yourself. Because I think following your own voice is really, it involves this essential component of trust. You know that the visualization that you are speaking to yourself is what you want to achieve. It's something that's come from your imagination. All it really needs is for you to have that anchor so that you can strengthen the visualization as you go into it, if you find that it's difficult to do that with your particular mind, as I find that it's sometimes quite difficult to do with mine. So if you actually listen to your own voice kind of liltingly guiding yourself through a visualization that you have woven together, then I think that might be quite a good way of doing it for those who do feel that, your imagination is rich, you have certain visualizations in mind that you've not read in books, or perhaps you've read visualizations in books but you want to really kind of branch out with them, or you want to make them more descriptive. It might be a really good thing to pre-record your visualizations and see if you can guide yourself into them in a stronger way by using a recording device. Another idea that I showed a long time ago on this channel some of my travel shrines and travel altars. I really like making things like this, and I know that there are a few witches out there who are quite practiced at making spirit houses. Spirit houses obviously are like little bottles or houses or anything like that, where you make it kind of comfortable and livable for a spirit to come along and visit, or for you to indeed invite spirits into, or bottle energies into, whatever it is. However, I mean, it works 100 different ways. One way of really strengthening visualization, I think, is to give your visualization some kind of 3D tangible place to take place. When I was a kid, I had a doll's house at my nana's place, and I used to actually do visualization and go into what I would consider to be a trance state when looking into this doll's house. So sometimes, instead of playing with the dolls and instead of kind of inventing scenes and setting up situations, I would look into the doll's house and I would gaze into it, and I would actually project myself into it, or I would imagine situations unfolding within it. And this was very useful because, even though obviously at that age I wasn't aware that I was trying to maintain a strong visualization, I was just using my mind to play a game without actually moving anything tangible around in the doll's house. In fact, what I was doing is I was using this 3D tangible construct to strengthen my ability to visualize. My imagination was made more potent on the basis that I could actually gaze into this 3D world. So I think making a spirit house, or something that in essence looks like a spirit house and is made the same way, might be a really useful idea to strengthen visualization. And you could make it as abstract as you wanted to. You could get a shoebox, buy a few things, kind of like secondhand doll's house things, and make it into a house if you wanted to recreate somewhere you've been before or your own kind of little world in there. Or you could make it really, really abstract. I know people that make spirit houses in very abstract ways using bottles. They cut up paper into really ornate shapes and then push it through the bottle and lengthen it out so it looks like its own little cosmos in there. And it's not anything that could be looked at and instantly recognised as a house or as furniture. But when you look in there, you get really absorbed because there's all this intricate stuff going on. I think at the Witchcraft Museum in Boscastle in Cornwall, I saw a spirit house that was made that way. It kind of had like netting and paper inside it with little beads attached, like tiny marbles. And it really did look like its own little universe, and it was very absorbing and it was very kind of intricate and it really drew you in. So I think sometimes making a place for your visualizations to strengthen and take hold might be a really good idea. And it doesn't have to be massive, it can be something that you can kind of fit into your life or your place where you do your magic and ritual. But I do think for people that have an issue with tying their imagination to one place, that might be useful. And I think visualization can be difficult as well for people who find it difficult getting in touch with their imagination. For me, visualization can be complex because I have such an overactive imagination. So that's difficult, and sometimes I need to meditate for quite a long time to actually empty the brain of outside influences before I begin trying to do a very strong and potent visualization. But for others, they just might have difficulty tying their imagination down or getting in touch with it at all. Maybe there's some difficult things or complex things which come up when the imagination is taken off of the hook and allowed to do its thing. And maybe that's why some people might keep their imagination on quite a tight rein. So sometimes I think it can be easier for those kinds of people if visualization has some tangible place in which to start. So that's kind of why I mentioned that. One other thing I wanted to mention was the use of psychopomps in visualization and in active imagination. The word psychopomp has two distinct meanings in this day and age. Firstly, psychopomps were normally the word psychopomp would be reserved for a character in mythology who was responsible for ferrying the souls of the dead to the other world or the underworld or the further or whatever you want to call it. And psychopomp also has taken on another meaning in psychoanalysis when Jung decided to use the word psychopomp to mean a character that would take you into your active imagination or into the dream world. In the dream world, women tend to dream, not always, but a lot of women tend to dream of their animus, the male component of themselves, or the male component of their psyche. And the male will normally, for me, very much, there's always these random guys coming along that I've never seen before in my waking life, and they will always have something to tell me or somewhere to guide me or some new world to show me around. And Jung believed that when women dreamt of these strong, influential men in their dreams, it was actually the masculine elements of their psyche looking for expression, and vice versa with the anima for men. What I would suggest with your psychopomp, when you go into a visualization or a form of active imagination, or where you go into trance work, you can often invite a psychopomp to come and kind of lead you in to this other world, or help to strengthen the visualization by again being that anchor for you. If you find that in dreams you tend to hook up with these characters, whether they're the opposite gender to you or not, if you tend to find you hook up with these characters who kind of show you around these other worlds or these other realms, or you're not really sure about them and you have to get to know them, then it could be that you have a whole bunch of psychopomps running around, which could be quite useful to you in waking life when you're trying to take yourself through different visualizations. I find, for example, I have two main psychopomps that I use during active imagination exercises. I'm going to explain active imagination in another video and how it links in with Jung. But for now, I would suggest occasionally when I'm feeling very frantic and unable to kind of centre on one thing during visualization, or when I feel what I like to call that pane of glass, where I can see the setting that the visualization wants to take place in, but I feel like I'm walking up to it and I'm butting heads against this pane of glass. I can't get through to the other side to actually allow the visualization to absorb me. I will call upon a psychopomp. I'll call upon either my animus to come to me in some form, or I will decide upon one of the two key psychopomps that I tend to see during active imagination exercises, both of which are male psychopomps that I originally met in dreams and which seem to always kind of return to me when I'm doing any kind of visualization or trance work. So if I'm having problems with the pane of glass, I'll normally call upon a psychopomp, and it kind of turns out, as my imagination unweaves itself, that they know a way. They know a way into the setting. They know a way to get me into the rich density of the setting that I've chosen for my visualization. So that's quite a useful one as well. It might be kind of complex and weird to some of you, but for those of you who have an anima or an animus, or many that you find show up in dream work, or you can relate at all to the idea of having a psychopomp for active imagination. In fact, sometimes for those of you with spirit guides, they may also be your psychopomps during trance work or active imagination. So that might be a good thing for you to use if you find that visualization kind of gets a little bit complicated. So these are the ideas that I have for kind of strengthening it, and if you have any tips in return, or if you're quite good at visualization and you've found ways to strengthen and harness your imagination so it doesn't go off down 100 little portals, and you would like to explain to us your secrets, then do feel free to do so. Thank you very much for listening, guys. Blessed be.